They dazzled audiences with flawless smiles and effortless charm. But behind Hollywood's golden glow lurked a brutal truth. The stars we idolized were often hiding physical deformities, disabilities, and deep emotional scars. Secrets the studios worked tirelessly to bury. To maintain an illusion of perfection, actors were subjected to agonizing procedures, forced to deny their ethnic roots, and made to perform through unbearable pain. But concealment wasn't enough. The same studios that hid these conditions also weaponized them. For many, disability became a trap, a tool used by executives to control, manipulate, and silence. If a star dared to complain or refuse, their vulnerabilities were turned against them. Contracts included suspension clauses for visible defects, while experimental treatments were administered without consent, disguised as studio care. These performers weren't just enduring pain. They were being exploited by a system that saw imperfection as a liability unless it could be hidden or used. What audiences saw was glamour. What the actors lived was a prison of secrecy. And through it all, they continued to deliver iconic performances, their suffering rebranded as artistry. But the truth behind the curtain tells a far more haunting story of resilience, exploitation, and the devastating cost of fame. Clark Gable, Hollywood's ultimate leading man, built his legend on charm, masculinity, and that irresistible smile. Yet behind that smile was agony. By his early 30s, severe gum disease had destroyed his teeth, forcing him to wear a full set of dentures for the rest of his life. They looked perfect on camera, but they felt like torture. The dentures never fit properly, rubbing his gums raw and causing constant ulcers and infections. The pain was so intense that Gable relied on painkillers just to get through filming. Vivien Leigh, his Gone with the Wind co-star, once confided in her diary that kissing him felt like pressing your lips to a hot stove. His chronic infections also caused terrible breath, forcing actresses like Joan Crawford to dab peppermint oil inside their nostrils before romantic scenes. Technicians even had to remove a faint whistle from his dialogue recordings, caused by air slipping through the dentures. Directors began using stand-ins for Gable's close-ups during intimate shots, filming from behind to spare him the pain of extended takes. Off-camera, he avoided restaurants and covered his mouth when he laughed, terrified someone might notice the secret beneath the smile that made him a star. James Dean became the embodiment of cool, detached, intense, and emotionally raw. But what fans saw as mysterious charisma was in part Dean simply trying to function in a world he couldn't fully see or hear. Since childhood, Dean suffered from extreme nearsightedness. Without his thick glasses, which studios forbid him to wear on camera, he could barely see more than a few feet ahead. During the filming of Rebel Without a Cause, the director had to position him physically before every take. He was essentially acting blind. But vision wasn't his only struggle. Dean also had partial hearing loss, which made it difficult to understand cues on noisy film sets. His now iconic delayed responses weren't dramatic pauses, they were genuine efforts to process what he'd just heard. Studios, unaware or indifferent to his impairments, chalked up his behavior to eccentric method acting. This misinterpretation isolated him further. He often retreated between scenes, overwhelmed and exhausted. "Everyone thinks I'm being difficult," he told friend Dennis Hopper, "but I'm just trying to keep up." The vulnerability that made Dean a legend wasn't just a performance. It was his lived reality. His art was born from disorientation, and his legend shaped by a world he struggled to fully hear or see. Rita Hayworth wasn't born a Hollywood star. She was made into one, through pain, denial, and transformation. Born Margarita Cancino, her natural beauty didn't fit the studio's rigid definition of marketable. Columbia Pictures saw her Spanish features as a liability, and the solution was nothing short of brutal. To erase her ethnic identity, Hayworth was forced to undergo over a year of electrolysis treatments without anesthesia. Electric needles burned her scalp inch by inch to raise her hairline, a process so painful she bit down on a towel just to endure it. Her blouses were often soaked with blood after the sessions, but she never spoke of the agony publicly. Her physical transformation didn't stop there. Hayworth also had uneven legs, forcing her to wear custom orthopedic shoes, one nearly an inch higher than the other, hidden beneath her glamorous high heels. Every elegant dance sequence came with searing hip pain, Perhaps the cruelest cut was psychological. She was trained to reject her roots. Studio handlers coached her to act confused if anyone mentioned her Spanish background. "They made me ashamed of who I was," she later told her daughter. In becoming America's dream girl, Hayworth lost the right to be herself. Lon Chaney Sr. earned the nickname the Man of 1,000 Faces, but behind every transformation was unimaginable pain. Born to deaf parents, Chaney developed extraordinary control over his facial expressions through sign language. But his commitment to physical transformation pushed his body beyond human limits. For the Hunchback of Notre Dame, he didn't wear a costume hump. He built a 70-pound concrete and metal brace that crushed his torso and compressed his lungs. The pain was excruciating. He could only endure 10 minutes at a time before vomiting blood off set. When the director begged him to use lighter materials, Chaney refused, insisting, "Quasimodo suffered, I must suffer too." His self-inflicted torment didn't stop there. For the Phantom of the Opera, he inserted wires into his nostrils to pull them upward, hooks inside his mouth to stretch his cheeks, and black paint around his eyes that burned his skin, leaving him temporarily blind after filming. The effects were terrifyingly real, but so were the consequences: infections, nerve damage, and internal bleeding. By the time he died at just 47, his body was broken by his art. Chaney's monsters were unforgettable because he truly lived and suffered inside them. Harold Lloyd was the king of silent-era comedy stunts, dangling from skyscrapers, leaping between moving cars, and clinging to clock towers high above city streets. Audiences marveled at his daring, never knowing the truth. He was performing all of it with a severely injured hand. In 1919, a prop bomb exploded in Lloyd's hand, blowing off his thumb and index finger and damaging the nerves in the rest. The studios downplayed the injury, but it nearly ended his career. Lloyd refused to let it. He commissioned a custom prosthetic glove designed to mimic a full hand, but it was rigid, hot, and agonizing to wear. It limited his grip strength so drastically that every stunt became a life-threatening gamble. When he clung to ledges or scaled buildings, he did so with only 3 partially functioning fingers. One slip could have meant certain death. He was offered directing jobs to step back from physical roles, but Lloyd insisted on proving he wasn't diminished. "Every time I hang from a building," he said, "I'm showing them, and myself, I'm still capable." The glove became a symbol of both resilience and suffering. Hidden beneath his iconic horn-rimmed glasses and slapstick smile was a man performing through pain, risk, and absolute determination. Bela Lugosi's chilling portrayal of Dracula defined horror for generations. But the haunting walk, the hypnotic stare, and the slow, eerie delivery weren't acting choices. They were symptoms of very real pain. Lugosi suffered from severe sciatica caused by injuries sustained in World War I. The nerve damage left him in constant agony, forcing him to walk with stiff, jerking movements. That now famous vampire stride wasn't part of the script. It was the only way he could move without collapsing. Off camera, he clung to furniture between takes and relied on morphine to endure the pain. His piercing gaze? Lugosi was legally blind without thick glasses, which he wasn't allowed to wear during filming. He stared intensely, not to intimidate, but to focus on the blurred figures in front of him. Even his voice carried hidden struggles. A traumatic brain injury from the war impaired his language processing, so Lugosi memorized lines phonetically. His slow, deliberate delivery became iconic, but it masked a battle to articulate speech. Studios never acknowledged his disabilities. They exploited them. His suffering was marketed as genius, and when his health declined, they cast him aside. Yet Lugosi never broke character. "The monsters I play suffer," he once said. "I understand their pain." Merle Oberon captivated audiences with her exotic beauty and regal poise, but her on-screen perfection was a fragile illusion built on pain, fear, and denial. In 1937, a devastating car accident shattered her cheekbone and severed facial nerves, leaving the left side of her face paralyzed and deeply scarred. The damage was far worse than studios admitted. Her husband, cinematographer Lucien Ballard, invented a special OB light to cast shadowless illumination, cleverly concealing the disfigurement. Between every take, makeup artists discreetly wiped drool from the side she could no longer feel. But the scars hid an even deeper secret: her race. Born in India to an Anglo-Indian mother, Oberon's career depended on passing as white. Every day began with layers of whitening makeup to lighten her naturally brown skin, which caused rashes and long-term damage. The psychological toll was devastating. She suffered a breakdown during Wuthering Heights, when brighter lighting threatened to expose both her scarring and her true skin tone. The most heartbreaking moment came years later in Bombay, when relatives approached her, eager to reconnect. She denied knowing them, clinging to her fabricated Tasmanian origin. "I don't know who I am anymore," she later confessed. Hollywood had rewritten both her face and her identity. Katharine Hepburn and Lionel Barrymore were two of Hollywood's most respected performers, but both battled physical conditions the studios fought hard to conceal. Hepburn began experiencing essential tremor in her early 30s, a neurological disorder that caused uncontrollable shaking in her hands and head. Studios dismissed it as nerves or eccentricity, but Hepburn adapted with brilliance. She developed a distinctive speaking style, clipped, fast, and rhythmic, to distract from her tremors, and pioneered the use of high necklines, scarves, and pockets in her wardrobe to steady her body and hide shaking hands. Her constant movement on screen wasn't just flair, it was survival. Lionel Barrymore, meanwhile, suffered from severe arthritis and a badly healed hip injury that left him unable to walk. Studios initially forced him into metal leg braces worn under his clothes, causing bleeding and unbearable pain. Only when he physically couldn't stand anymore did MGM allow him to act from a wheelchair, though they claimed it was due to a one-time injury, not a chronic condition. Both stars continued working despite their limitations, but not without cost. Studios reduced Barrymore's pay and threatened Hepburn with exposure whenever she pushed for better roles. Their perseverance was heroic, but their treatment was anything but.